Explosive debate. Liberals' emotional outburst over gas car ban sparks fierce Conservative response. Prime Minister Mark Carney's gas car ban has erupted into one of the most heated political battles in the country since he took office following the April 2025 snap election. The Liberals' plan to eliminate the sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035 is being hailed by their supporters as a bold move to meet climate goals, but many Canadians, and the entire Conservative opposition, see it as a deeply flawed, authoritarian policy that ignores economic hardship, regional diversity, and infrastructure realities. The debate reached a boiling point in Parliament as a Liberal MP lashed out in frustration, accusing critics of obstructing progress. That outburst only poured more fuel on an already combustible issue that pits idealism against practicality and government mandates against personal choice. For everyday Canadians, the policy isn't just ambitious, it's unaffordable. Entry-level electric vehicles are still priced out of reach for most working families. Even the cheapest EVs run upwards of $60,000, and hybrid vehicles often cost over $40,000. All this comes as families are already struggling with inflation, rising food prices, and mortgage stress. To make matters worse, the federal government abruptly canceled the $5,000 rebate on new EV purchases, removing one of the few supports that made EV adoption remotely accessible. This sudden policy change left many Canadians in limbo, unable to afford an EV and without alternatives. Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, have fiercely opposed the mandate, not because they reject environmental responsibility, but because they believe this plan ignores economic and logistical reality. Poilievre has labeled the mandate a fantasy tax on working families and has warned that forcing people into expensive vehicles will hit rural Canadians the hardest. The opposition's motion to repeal the ban focuses on restoring affordability, consumer choice, and protecting jobs, particularly in sectors dependent on traditional vehicle manufacturing. According to Conservative estimates, the policy could lead to over 38,000 lost jobs and cost the country hundreds of billions in infrastructure and economic fallout. That infrastructure challenge is no small concern. As of now, Canada has only around 60,000 EV charging stations, barely a fraction of the estimated 700,000 required to sustain a nationwide EV fleet by 2035. And even that estimate assumes optimal rollout, funding, and logistics. Installation rates have slowed, and there is a stark disparity between urban and rural areas. In many remote communities, charging stations are virtually non-existent, and upgrading electrical grids to handle the load would require billions in investment and years of construction. Yet the Liberals press forward, offering vague promises of future readiness without addressing the very real gaps in the present. Beyond affordability and infrastructure, the biggest obstacle might simply be geography and climate. Canada's winters are among the harshest in the world, and cold weather severely impacts EV battery performance. In freezing temperatures, range can drop by 40 to 70%. For drivers in northern regions or people who rely on heavy-duty vehicles for towing and job-related transport, EVs are not just inconvenient, they're unreliable. Trucks like the Ford F-150 Lightning lose massive range when towing or operating in the cold, making them impractical for anyone who doesn't live in a city or work an office job. Despite these known issues, the Liberals continue to dismiss these concerns as exaggerations or political noise. The emotional climax of this debate came when a Liberal MP erupted during question period, passionately defending the ban and accusing Conservatives of standing in the way of progress. Instead of inspiring confidence, the outburst revealed how fragile the government's position has become. Critics noted that rather than answering legitimate questions about feasibility, affordability, and access, the Liberals resorted to shaming their opponents, painting skepticism as climate denialism and policy critique as sabotage. This tone has alienated many moderate voters who support climate action but want it done in a thoughtful, realistic way. One of the strongest rebuttals came from Conservative MP Melissa Lantsman, who reminded the House that Conservatives aren't against EVs, they're against forcing them on everyone. She pointed out that while EVs may work for people in downtown Toronto or Vancouver, they simply aren't viable for many Canadians in suburban, rural, or remote areas. She challenged the government to answer why they insist on making EVs the only acceptable option instead of allowing for hybrids, exemptions, and other transitional solutions. Her comment struck a chord with Canadians who feel left behind by a top-down policy made with little consultation and even less flexibility. Poilievre has seized on the moment to draw a sharp contrast between his vision and Carney's. He pledges to restore the EV rebate, cancel the gas car ban, and allow Canadians to make their own choices about vehicles. His platform emphasizes consumer choice, market-driven solutions, and infrastructure built to match demand, not the other way around. He argues that if EVs are genuinely better, more efficient, and more affordable, people will buy them on their own. But if the government has to force the shift, it's a sign the policy is deeply flawed. The Liberals argue that such action is necessary to meet emissions targets and align Canada with global climate goals. But many are questioning whether it's right, or even possible, to transform the country's transportation system with so little readiness or buy-in. Several major automakers have already begun pulling back from EV investments due to falling demand and high costs. Battery-related issues, recalls, and even vehicle fires have made headlines. And the government's multi-billion-dollar deals with battery plant developers are facing delays and concerns over long-term job creation. These are not fringe issues. They go to the heart of whether the transition is sustainable. Under Carney's leadership, the Liberals have tried to project certainty and resolve, but the backlash suggests that voters want more than slogans. They want detailed answers, clear timelines, and flexibility for different regions and needs. They want reassurance that the government understands their concerns and will adjust course when needed. So far, that reassurance has not come. Instead, voters are seeing emotional defenses and rigid mandates that seem disconnected from reality. This debate is about more than climate policy. It's about who gets to decide how Canadians live, work, and move. It's about whether the federal government is listening to the people or imposing ideology from the top down. It's about freedom of choice and respecting the economic, geographic, and practical realities of life in a vast and diverse country. The fight over gas cars has become symbolic of something bigger, a growing divide between urban policymakers and the working Canadians expected to pay for their decisions.